Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany. Welcome to Randomness, where we talk about a little bit of everything, the deep, the weird, and the real. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's get into it. All right, guys, today we are talking about emotional suppression, what it actually is, what it does to your body, your mind, and your energy, and most importantly, what to do instead. And this one is a little personal for me too, because I am someone who has absolutely been guilty of pushing things down, putting on a brave face and telling myself I'm fine when I was very much not fine. And I know I'm not alone in that. So this episode is as much for me as it is for you. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about what emotional suppression actually is, because I think a lot of people don't realize they're doing it. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's like really quiet, really normalized. Emotional suppression is essentially the conscious or semi-conscious decision to push down, ignore, or override what you're feeling. And we do it for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you grew up in a household where emotions weren't really welcomed, where crying was seen as weakness or anger wasn't allowed, or you learned early that being too much made people uncomfortable. Maybe you've been through something so painful that the only way you knew how to survive it was to not feel it. Maybe you're so busy with work, with kids, with life, that there genuinely isn't space to sit with your emotions, so you just keep moving. And here's the thing. In the short term, suppression works. It gets you through the meeting. It gets you through the holidays. It gets you out of bed in the morning when grief or anger or fear would otherwise have you flat on the floor. But the long term is where it gets complicated, because emotions are not static. They don't just sit quietly in the corner waiting for you to be ready for them. They move, they build. And when they don't have a healthy outlet, they find one anyway. So let's talk about what suppressed emotions actually do to your body, because this is the part that I think people don't think about enough or even talk about, and it's kind of crazy. There is decades of research now connecting chronic emotional suppression to real, measurable physical consequences. We're talking about things like elevated cortisol levels. That is your primary stress hormone, which, when chronically elevated, contributes to inflammation, disrupted sleep, weight changes, and a weakened immune system. And studies have linked long-term emotional suppression to higher rates of cardiovascular disease, digestive issues, chronic pain, and even certain cancers. And then there's the mental health. Of course, suppression is strongly linked to anxiety and depression, which, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Anxiety is often what happens when emotions don't get processed. They just kind of circulate. They don't have anywhere to go, so they just kind of keep looping. And depression can be what happens when emotions get buried so deep and for so long that you lose access to your emotional range altogether. So you just kind of go numb. And numbness feels like relief at first, until you realize you've also lost access to the good stuff, the joy, the excitement, the love. You can't selectively numb when you shut down the hard feelings. You shut down all of them. Okay, so now let's bring in the spiritual dimension because I think this is where it gets pretty interesting. In energy work and a lot of spiritual traditions, emotions are understood as energy in motion. That's actually where the word comes from. Emotion, energy in motion. And the idea is that emotions are meant to move through you. They're not meant to be permanent residents, right? They're meant to arrive, be felt, communicate something, and then move on. When you suppress an emotion, you are essentially stopping that energy mid-motion. You're trapping it, and trapped energy in the body is understood in a lot of healing modalities, from traditional Chinese medicine to therapy and Reiki as the root of both physical and spiritual blockages. Like if you think about your chakras for a second, the solar plexus, your center of personal power and self-worth, is deeply connected to emotions like anger and shame. The heart chakra governs grief and love. The throat chakra governs your ability to express yourself authentically. And when emotions connected to those centers get chronically suppressed, those energy centers get blocked. And blocked energy centers show up not just as emotional symptoms, but as physical ones. Throat issues, chest tightness, digestive problems, chronic tension in the body. Your body is keeping score, even when your mind is trying to keep secrets. Okay, so here is the question everyone gets to eventually. Okay, I know suppression isn't good for me, but what do I actually do instead? Because telling someone to just feel their feelings is about as helpful as telling someone who can't sleep to just sleep. It sounds simple, and it is absolutely not simple. So let's get practical here. Here are some actual alternatives to suppression. And I want to be clear, these are not about wallowing. They're not about making your emotions your whole personality or living in a permanent state of processing. They're about giving your emotions what they need so they can actually move through you instead of getting stuck. And the first thing is to name it. This sounds almost too simple, but there is genuine neurological research behind it. When you put a name to what you're feeling, now not just bad or upset, but actually specific, like I feel humiliated, or I feel terrified, or I feel grief, it activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of your brain, and it actually reduces the intensity of the emotional response in the amygdala. So naming an emotion literally turns down its volume. So the next time something hits you, instead of immediately pushing it down, just pause and get specific. What is this actually? And name it. The second thing is to give it somewhere to go, right? Emotions need expression, and expression doesn't have to mean talking about it with someone, although that can help. It can be writing it out, just a raw stream of consciousness, whatever comes out. It can be movement, going for a run, dancing in your room, doing something physical that lets the energy move through your body. It can be crying, which, by the way, is one of the most underrated emotional tools we have. Tears literally contain stress hormones. Your body is physically releasing cortisol and other stress chemicals when you cry. Interesting, huh? It is biological self-regulation, and we should be a lot less embarrassed about it. Now, the third thing is to get curious instead of judgmental. One of the reasons we suppress is because we've decided that certain emotions are unacceptable. Anger is scary. Jealousy is ugly. Grief is too heavy. Fear makes us seem weak. And so we push them down before we even fully feel them because we've already judged them as something we shouldn't have. But every emotion is information. Anger is usually pointing at a boundary that's been crossed or a value that's been violated. Jealousy is usually pointing at something you deeply want for yourself. Grief is pointing at how much you loved something. Fear is pointing at something that matters to you. So get curious about what the emotion is trying to tell you instead of immediately trying to make it stop. The fourth thing, and this is the spiritual piece, okay, is to create a practice of release. And this looks different for everyone. For some people, it's meditation. For others, it's prayer, breath work, time in nature, or working with energy healing practices. The point is having something in your regular life that helps you process and release emotional energy on an ongoing basis, not just when you hit a crisis point. Think of it like emotional maintenance. You don't wait until your car breaks down to put gas in it. You shouldn't wait until you're overflowing to tend to your emotional body either. Okay, so I want to say something directly to anyone listening who has spent a long time being the strong one, the one who holds it together, the one everyone else leans on, the one who doesn't really talk about what they're going through because there's always something more important to deal with or someone else who needs them more. I see you and I want you to hear this. Being strong does not mean being numb. Strength is not the absence of feeling. It's the ability to feel something fully and still keep going. Those are completely different things. One of them builds resilience and the other one builds a pressure cooker. You are allowed to have emotions. You are allowed to not be okay. You're allowed to put down the weight of holding everything together long enough to actually feel what's underneath it. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing you can do. So, here's what I want you to take away from this episode. Your emotions are not inconveniences. They are not character flaws. They are not signs that you're too sensitive or too broken or too much. They are messengers. And when you suppress them, you're not getting rid of the message. You're just refusing to read it. And it will keep coming back louder each time until you do. Feel it, name it, let it move, and trust that on the other side of actually feeling something is a version of you that is lighter, clearer, and more free than the one who spent all that energy holding it down. All right, guys, until next time, remember, what you refuse to feel doesn't disappear. It just goes underground, and underground things always find a way to resurface. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow. And remember, keep your energy grounded, your mind open, and your curiosity alive.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.